In this episode...
Hello, I'm Neil at AFCB I'm here to talk to you about the mighty Cherries.
The Fantasy Football Show.
Hello listeners and welcome to episode number 13 of the Planet FPL 30 in 30. My name's Suj.
And my name is still James.
And unlucky for some, we have the one and only Neil, our Bournemouth correspondent, who has to put up with us for episode 13.
13 is my lucky number.
Hi Neil, how are you doing? Sorry, give us
I'm all right, thanks. It's Wilson's number. So
yeah, I was going to say, who wears the shirt number for the Cherries for number 13? If it's Callum Wilson, then
it is.
I bet he's looking forward to the introduction of VAR next year.
That's quite unusual. Is there a reason behind that? Do you know?
I think it's the opposite, of luck. Players wear anti-bad.
Terry Henry used to be number 13, didn't he? Thierry Henry.
What? Going to get 14?
Was he 14?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he was number 13 on his back of his shirt.
Gallus wear 13 at Chelsea.
Yeah, there've been a few that have worn 13, but it's not common.
It's commonly a goalkeeper backup number, isn't it?
It is indeed. So Neil, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, you've been writing bits and pieces throughout the season about Bournemouth, who ended up being one of the real finds of the season in terms of budget buys for FPL, with Ryan Fraser, Brooks, Wilson, Josh King, all priced reasonably well last season. Ended up being a real interesting place to go for options. But tell us, starting, how was your 2018-19 FPL season? How did you do?
Sorry, there.
Sorry. How is your 2018-19 season? How did you do?
It's in FPL. So weird one, really. So I got my highest ever points total, but my lowest ever ranking. So,
wow.
Go figure.
How many years have you been playing?
So I got, I finished about 400,000, but got about 20 more points than I've ever got before. But not so good.
I mean, that does go to show what a tough season it was last year, with the scores being considerably higher than they had been in previous seasons.
Yeah, and I don't think, looking back at my history, I don't think I had really 1 week where I went, I think I got some mid. There wasn't anything really, really dire in there, and I had quite a lot of 90s. So who knows, eh?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose to finish 400k with that, it's similar to the run that I was on from game week 5, 6 all the way up to 2020. Week in, week out was 46, 48, 52, 55. Everything was bunched around that 50 mark. And there was no disasters, but everyone else was scoring 60, 65, which made the real difference.
No, exactly that. And I think there was, a couple of the other podcasts have alluded to it as well. Just the top four, in that run-in at the end, if you had the right players, you smashed it. But if you went with sort of the normal options that you might want to pick, it just went massively sideways very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, look at FPL Gaffer. We mentioned you listened to his show. He went from 25,000 down to 140,000 at Christmas. But I'm talking about the last 4 weeks. You can see a drop over 10, 12 weeks. You can easily drop a few 100,000, but he dropped 125,000 spots in the last 4 weeks, which was painful.
Neil, can we take you back to game week 1 last? Obviously at the start of the season, there's 2 Bournemouth players in that team you started with, Fraser and Wilson.
Yep.
You knew something, didn't you?
I think I wrote the article. The first article I wrote for you guys, I called it Wilson and Fraser. Fraser played a lot more higher up the pitch this year. The year before last, I suppose last season now, he was playing in sort of a full-back position, wing-back position, which meant he wasn't getting forward for the assists. However, I noticed that we'd signed Diego Rico, although he didn't actually play much in the end. He was always likely to push Fraser up the pitch, Eddie Howe. Just because of that, he was signing the fullbacks. Nathaniel Klein as well obviously came in towards the end of the season. But that's allowed Fraser to really show his creativity and really cause those problems. I think he won some ridiculous amount of fouls. I don't have the stats in front of me for it, but I think he was right up there with like Zaha, players that you think are going to get fouled a lot. He was right up there with them.
And the thing with Fraser is that it wasn't kind of like a half-season flash in the pan, but he was consistent throughout the season, even towards the end of the season, which is going to beg the question, what happens next season? Because he's not going to start at the same price that he started this season for sure. He could be anywhere, 7.5 or 8 million. But do you think he's going to carry that on? As in, is he going to be in your game week 1 team for next season?
So it's difficult to say today. Now, if he stays with us, yes, he will be. Mm-hmm. If he, as is widely being reported, may be on the move, then I don't think he will. Purely because I can't see him being used in the same way at pretty much any of the teams he's being linked with.
Sure.
So any of the top 6, he's not going to be sort of their first choice go-to creative player, where he is for us.
To be honest with you, I can't see a top 6 club coming in to buy him. And I suppose they do need creativity. And if he was to move, of all the top 6 clubs, Arsenal's probably the one.
Adam said on the Arsenal pod about they want wingers, right? So.
Yeah, I suppose if there's any of the top 6 clubs that he could go to and maybe have an impact, Arsenal would be the one where he's most likely to get minutes. So you may want to consider him there. Would he play ahead of Iwobi? Do you think?
Oh yeah, all day.
Yeah. So then at that point, if he's a start, and he's got at Arsenal, he'd have 2 strikers at the moment, at the time of recording, in Aubameyang and Lacazette, that know how to put the ball in the back of the net. Obviously, who knows if those 2 will be there at the start of next season.
Stop trying to sell the man's player.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just thinking about whether or not we go with Ryan Fraser, the wee man, next year.
My gut is, if he's still there in a Bournemouth shirt, because obviously the window, like last year, closes before the FPL deadline, which is useful. So if he's still there in a Cherries shirt, price dependent, unless they do something really bizarre with him. But I mean, he'll probably go up to 7.5, I would guess.
I think 7.5. Yeah.
Yep.
That's exactly what
I think he's still worth a shout, assuming that nothing else crazy goes on with the Bournemouth team. Obviously, Wilson has been linked, although I can't see him going. If those 2 are there, come the first game of the season, I would pick Fraser in my team.
Is it, as a Bournemouth fan, Neil, is it a constant worry for you about players leaving?
No. So it's a weird one. You would think for a club of our size that perhaps we might go the same way as some of our South Coast rivals have done in the past, where you end up selling.
A feeder club, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. We seem to be the reverse feeder club of Liverpool recently. But what we end up... I think the team that we've got and the core that we've got really has bought into what Eddie's doing. He's brought a lot of them on from, non-league clubs and lower league clubs. And I think they get that. I don't think there's really any of the sort of big egos in the squads that are coming out and are going to try and push for moves. That said, I mean, like Fraser, for example, if he says I want to go, I don't think any Bournemouth fans would really begrudge him going. But it's not a particular huge worry, I don't think.
You mentioned in there, Neil, about obviously the size of the club. I don't mean this disrespectfully when I say this, but can you just sort of relate to the listeners how small the club actually is?
Yeah. So, I mean, not even. I mean, this decade we've been in League Two, which I think is a big place to start with any Bournemouth story. But we've got a stadium that's barely in 5-figure seats. It's like 10,000 once you've taken out all of the TV stands and everything. We don't own 3 sides of the grounds. The one side that we do own is a temporary stand.
That's fucking class.
Yeah.
So garden sheds spring to mind for a lot of away fans. So that's the sort of level of club that we've got. I mean, to be where we are is ridiculous, to be honest.
The pound for pound, you would have to say that Bournemouth are performing the bet, like pound for pound, size of club versus points and performance.
Yeah.
Bournemouth are doing better than any other club in the league. You'd have to say that they were the pound for pound champions, the heavyweight champions of the world.
We treat them as a stable entity now.
Yeah.
That they're just part of the fabric now.
Yeah. I'm more worried about my own West Ham getting relegated next season with 60,000 week in, week out, and we'll probably spend 100 million in the summer than I am about Bournemouth going down, who won't spend that money and it's 10,000 week in, week out. That says a lot about, to be honest, Eddie Howe, I think.
Yeah, and I agree. I think this year is our biggest risk year for potentially, falling over. But I think that's because of the longer term project that I think Eddie's got going. So he seems to be really. We're getting to the end of some of the older guard. So your Charlie Daniels, your Simon Francis, Sermon, and there's 4 or 5 and goalkeeper as well, which I'm sure we'll go on to later. But there's 3 or 4 of the real key squad members that are now in their sort of 32, 33 sort of bracket, and he's starting to regenerate them. And we're in a real key period. If we can get through this season, I think we could become a very, very strong mid-table team. It is just getting through this changeover period.
I mean, you mentioned the likes of Daniels. He didn't play much last season. He did towards the end of the season, but I think Eddie's well on the way to recycling some of these players out. And hopefully Metham gets the start week in, week out, because James will have him in his team straight away.
He was the only guy in the world who bought him.
There was a 0.0001% ownership last year, and that was James.
It's interesting, Neil, and we can probably... I know you want to speak about the defence a little bit, because I said on a pod a few weeks ago, one of the things I picked up this season was that I would never own a Bournemouth defender again.
Yeah.
But I know you've got a little bit of confidence there, haven't you, Neil? In a few of the lads. Do you want to elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, so one of our key things with the defence, now we've got 2 real main strengths. We've got fullbacks that we really do use. So, I mean, we've just signed a lad from Bristol. I don't see a huge amount of goals from Lloyd Kelly, but he will be going forward. As well, you've also got Nathan Ake in there. If I remember rightly, he was I think he was a 5 million defender.
Yeah.
But he pops up. He will be in the box every game, looking for that head in the box. And he was also, interestingly, being played as a midfielder towards the end of last season.
He did against us, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that might be one to look out for, as one perhaps a defender playing up the pitch. And if I can't see his price changing at all. Now, we're not going to get clean sheet after clean sheet, but I think there's a lot of other aspects in our defence. If you're looking for a goal-scoring fullback or something like that, we might be worth a look. I also see us getting a new goalkeeper that could really change things as well.
What do you think of the young kid? Because he's done all right against my team.
Oh, that's probably the performance of his life.
I think I remember messaging you going,
we were before the game, yeah.
Yeah.
This will be a fun one, or something like that, and massively underestimating him. But the boy done good, right? And,
for sure. It was a hell of a performance.
Mark Travers, isn't it?
That's him. Yeah.
He's got any chance of starting as number 1?
Realistically, it's too soon for him. He got a real bad break against Palace, so not as in he broke, but as in he he had a bit of a shocker, where we lost 5-3, I think it was, in a ridiculous thriller at Selhurst Park on the last day. I think it might be a bit soon for him, but we've also got Aaron Ramsdale, who was on loan at Wimbledon last year, and he looks like he could be an England goalkeeper at some point.
Okay, interesting. Because Begovic and Boric are not up to it, are they?
Begovic, I think, is on his way out. I think Boric has just signed a new 1-year deal. I think he's worth having as a third keeper. I mean, he's 40 this year. And he's such a great fan. He's a fan favourite, just because he doesn't leave anything on the pitch. But yeah, I think realistically we're in the market for a goalkeeper. I think
if you could get third choice goalkeeper,
3 or 4, Butland being one. As well as a young lad, I can't pronounce his name, but it's Bartos something or other from Fiorentina, I think it is.
Okay, Jack Butland I can see.
Yeah, Butland would be a great signing. But if you're getting 40-year-old third choice keepers, I could get my gloves out, mate. I'm not 40 yet, but I reckon I could spring around the goal a little bit. Be a third choice
Eddie
Premier
Howe-
League goalkeeper.
You stick the gardening with them gloves, mate.
I'd get those novelty
Howe's
foam
listening, I'm
gloves. That'd be
available.
wicked.
You've been in Sidge's Garden. It's an interesting place, I can tell you. It's just interesting, just before we kind of finish on the back line, would you say Klein's permanent, right, Neil?
No.
Oh, it's
No,
not.
it was
So he's
a
gone
loan
back
deal.
to Would you think it will happen?
I think he might be a bit rich for our blood, and there's a lot of conjecture out there that perhaps he didn't leave on the best terms at the end of the season.
Okay.
I mean, that's all fan rumour, but it'll be interesting to see. I think we'll definitely get a new right back, whether it's him or another player.
Okay. And on Aki, just interesting, because obviously you mentioned that he played holding midfield right at the back end of the season. What do you think the thinking was behind that? Because he's obviously your best centre-half.
Oh, clearly. So we're actually, centre-half is one of a position that we're somewhat blessed with in terms of actual players. So we've got Steve Cook, who will be ever present there, Metham, Ake, and we've got a young lad, Jack Simpson, all of whom I think are more than capable on their day of playing in that role. Whereas we don't have a massive embarrassment of riches in the centre of the park. So towards the end of the season, I think we had like one recognised centre midfielder that wasn't injured. So I think he could play forward, and he has played forward. I think he played forward for Watford a couple of times. So I think he can do that role in front of giving support to the young lads.
What's the best pairing essentially? Is that Lerma +1 at the moment? Is it Goslin maybe?
Again, I think what we will see will be Lerma plus Lewis Cook.
Oh, of course, yeah. Yeah, another good young kid, him.
Yeah, he was very, very unfortunate. I think he did his ACL in December.
Yeah.
And yeah, that really, ruined his season. But if he comes back to the same level, I think he really will come out all guns blazing. He looked really, really good off the back of last summer.
Yeah, I know Spurs were watching him closely.
Yeah, and I don't think it's any coincidence that he got injured and our form went south.
Interesting.
Yeah, talking of young talent, the youngest looking of them all was priced incredibly well at 5 million in Brooks last year. If he was 5 million again, you had him in your game week one.
Some player for a 12-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Eddie Howe gives him time off to go and do his 13+ exams or.
No, I didn't have Brooks in my game week one team.
It was you were Will Hughes, weren't you? As your budget option that you went with.
The other one who looks 12.
He also looks quite young.
He looks older than Brooks.
But if Brooks is getting minutes, because he is an attacking midfielder, he's got no defensive duties really. He'd be a great option, and I don't think he'll go up in value next season. At 5 million, he may still be there. And if one of I don't think Josh King's leaving, but if Wilson was to leave, you could see him playing up front off Josh King.
Oh yeah.
Hey, Brooks price was really interesting one. I'm not sure.
I mean, if he's priced as he's going to be a midfielder again at 5 million. He's going to have decent ownership.
And rightly so, I think. He really exciting prospect, doing well. He did well for the Wales setup in the last round of fixtures as well. Scored from outside the box, I think it was. So he's got goals in him. He got 7 goals last season.
What does he need to do to get regular minutes, do you think? Just carry on doing what he's doing, or because of his age, do you think he's just likely to get rotated regardless?
I think there's got to be a balance there at his age, but I think he will be in and around the first team every game. He picked up a little bit of an injury towards the end of the season, which is why he dropped off. But if he's fit, I think he'll play. Yeah,
I agree. Looking in from the outside, I think he's confirmed part of that best 11. Definitely.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because actually one of the things we don't really mention with Bournemouth so much is obviously Fraser Wilson's sort of 47 goal involvements between the two of them last season. You've got Josh King, you've obviously got Brooks. Stanislas went very under the radar, suffered a bit with injuries last year. And obviously Solanke's in there now as well. So there's depth in the forward positions, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we've known all season that, and we've said that Bournemouth will score goals. It's just that they'll concede a few as well. And next season, I suppose this summer is about as much about signing new talent as keeping a hold of what you've got there, really, isn't it?
No, for sure. I think that will be on Eddie Howe's sort of wish list. Will be number one, keep what we've got. Number two, recruit new defence probably, and then build, because I think, like you've said, we're very forward heavy at the moment, which is great as a fan that goes and sees the games. You're almost guaranteed. I can't remember the last time I saw a 0-0 for us.
Well, I nearly saw one in game week 37, mate. But
yeah, but we didn't.
Yeah, good lad. You can have that one.
Yeah.
So I think we'll always score goals. There is the problem that you have from a fantasy football point of view, though, is which of those three, or which of those four, if you include Brooks in that, is going to get the nod. Wilson probably, but then you've got King, Solanke and Brooks all really sort of competing for a very similar sort of position in the squad. If Fraser goes, I think that makes that a little bit easier. You would move Brooks probably into sort of that position. But you've still got Solanke, King, Wilson for 2 slots. And Musette as well.
Of course. I suppose it comes down to, are they a set and forget pick for you, in which case you'd want to go with Wilson because you know he's going to play week in, week out? Or is it one of those positions that you may rotate with someone else? Because Brooks at 5 million is rotatable. You can bring him in for the home fixtures or what have you. Whereas if you're giving up one of your 15 slots for someone that you don't want to chop and change, obviously Wilson's much more reliable. Josh King, obviously, the thing is, this year they were priced so close, if not identical, at certain points of the season. And Josh King ended up returning in weeks where Wilson didn't, and he was on set pieces. I owned Josh King probably from around about game week 25-26 when I was building towards the blank in 31, because Wilson had his injury right at that time.
I did exactly the same.
Yeah, and then I sat on Josh King, and he ended up returning during that 31 to 33 period. So there's just as much of an argument because of the set pieces to go with King over Wilson as a set and forget, but it does make it tricky from a Bournemouth point of view.
Yeah, I mean, my gut, and as I said at the start of last season, I think Wilson is more likely to get you the goals, excluding the set pieces. I just think, just watching him, he's also tends to get more assists as well. I think he got 9 last year, and the ridiculous stat of Fraser and Wilson getting 14. I think they got the highest amount of goals combined
for each other, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was 14 in the end, in sort of the shortened Premier League. So, yeah, I think Wilson will always get goals. I mean, we even saw it in the England game, although it wasn't a goal. But, he just does that. He just gets in that position.
It was noticeable. There was a period, I think, between 24 and game week 30, where Wilson was absent and Fraser's numbers just fell.
Yep.
Completely. I think Brooks missed a few of those games as well, in fairness, and the fixtures weren't the best, but they have an incredible link-up, and you can see they enjoy playing with each other. As soon as Wilson come in, goal and assist for each other at Huddersfield. I think that was the blank game week, wasn't it? Straight away afterwards. My thoughts from the outside is, I think if Brooks is 5, that's really tempting, because I think holding value in the midfield and forward areas, if like people supposedly want to do and go sort of a lot of the budget at the back more so than would be normal, people like Brooks are going to be great fun. I mean, if it's 5 million again, I think I'd start with him. That would be my instinct.
100%. I think Brooks is a fire and forget, like you said.
And there's no reason really to look at it on the outside and think his price will go up. You can't put up the price of every single player.
No,
just because you're seeing the potential they've done all right. And especially comparing sort of Fraser and Wilson's numbers, we both think they'll jump to sort of 7.5-ish.
Yeah.
But Brooks, his ownership was low all season. He finished at sort of 4%. It was never owned by more than a couple of 100,000 people at a time. So from that perspective, there's no real reason to think that his price will jump up. And the natural instinct of most people will still be to migrate to Wilson and Fraser, right?
Of course.
So
herd mentality.
Who's the pen taker, would you say, Neil? Because that's going to be important next year.
It does move around. So it was King for most of the year. What Eddie tends to do is someone misses one, they'll sit out the next couple. So it really depends who's on the pitch.
Because you get quite a few.
One. Sorry?
You get quite a few, it feels like, as in penalties.
Well, yeah. I think Fraser helps that, to be honest. So it's sort of players that like to go around the player, and he often gets that trailing foot. So it might be interesting to see with him going potentially what happens to our penalties. I think Wilson will always get them. He's just that sort of crafty sort of player. But yeah, I think we will still get a few. That's just our nature. We like to be in and around the box.
Definitely. A lot of Bournemouth's goals were from inside the box last season, and you do pass it around and get in there. Brooks gets in quite a lot. You can see maybe VAR might benefit Bournemouth next season with more penalties. It'd be interesting to see.
I feel already I think kind of the outside perception on Bournemouth, you kind of touched on it at the start, Neil, was this year might be difficult. But actually, when you list the squad, there's good depth throughout it. Yeah,
Eddie Howe's going to stay there. The one that might, like, obviously there's always breakout players who are low ownership but do really perform, and Fraser being one of them last season. But the back end of the season before was when Stanislas was doing particularly well, and obviously he then had a lot of injury worries. It may even be that Stanislas comes in cheaper than Ryan Fraser but delivers the same kind of results from the opposite side.
It would definitely be cheaper.
I liked Stanislas. I thought it was a really good option the back end of the season before last, but obviously injuries made him a non-option. When he did become fit again, the problem was at that point you had so many options that he wasn't getting the minutes consistently. But I don't know. What are your thoughts in kind of like an outsider? If you're not going to go with the bog standard 4 of Fraser, Brooks, Wilson and King, maybe looking at Stanislas if you know he's going to get minutes.
So the problem with Stanislas is he's made of glass.
Right.
Now
because he's come from West Ham's academy. That's why.
Well, exactly. The West Ham school of treatment table.
Yeah.
So he's made of glass, but he will be on. If he's on the pitch, he will take free kicks, and probably corners as well. He scored from the corner
as well.
Yeah.
So yes, it would. I think it would have an effect on Fraser. Stanislas is the preferred free kick taker, but equally he'll come in for 2 games and then be injured for 4. So it's difficult. I wouldn't hang my hat on Stanislas as that sort of gamble player, the differential player that perhaps Bournemouth could emerge with.
Yeah.
I think it could be, and this is a real left field, it could well be Lewis Cook. I think this could be his big year in the centre midfield. He was looking like he was going to start to pass forward, really start to give us that creative edge. Obviously, Brooks gave it to us in the end, but if he can recreate that sort of 3 or 4 months at the end of last year for the whole year, I think he will be in with a good shot at being.
What was he priced at in FPL? Because I never even had a look at Lewis Cook, to be honest with you. Probably 4.5.
4.5 next season.
He's cheap as chips then.
I mean, he's the one. If he's going to be fit, he's the sort of one who can fill that job for you, right? He's going to sit on the bench and you get the auto stuff. He's certainly going to progress as a footballer. I think Neil's kind of reiterated the fact that if he's fit, he's got enough talent that he's going to be playing regularly. As I said previously, a few of the big sides looked at him. I just wouldn't see the numbers in him. Neil would be the only thing that put me off. He'd be someone who'd sit on my bench, I think.
Yeah, I think he's one to keep an eye out. If he gets a good pre-season, a full pre-season, I think you'll start to see. So when he left Leeds to join us, he was a little bit deeper of a player because he had to be in our team. Now we've got Lerma who fills that deeper role. I think I can see Lewis Cook pushing up and being more of sort of a playmaker in the sort of the advanced playmaker sort of role and putting the balls into Wilson. I think he's also, from what I've seen in like training videos and things, he has got a shot on him as well. So I think he could start. He might be sort of a 5 or 6, 7 goals a year, but he might get 8 or 9 assists, sort of that sort of level. I think if he's fit.
That's a lot. That's going to sort of Iwobi numbers, isn't it? I think that would be huge. I don't see that personally. But
I feel like he's kind of like the Gundogan of.
If he's going to be fit, he's one that could fall into that that shortlist at 4.5. I think. I could definitely consider him at that price as a bench base. He started last season at 5.
I feel like he fills that Gundogan kind of position where he's cheap but does get some returns, but you almost can't quite justify going to him because the returns are not quite
it's all
there.
Potential with Lewis Cook, I think.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. He wouldn't be top of my list necessarily, but kind of on the top of the watch list. He'd definitely be in the watch list.
He would be if everyone's fit. He'd be in my starting 11. So I think you've got that as well. That he may not always get you a return. He's not going to be prolific like Fraser, I don't think. But if he's 4.5 million and a guaranteed starter for a team that builds out of the midfield and gets lots of goals, I think you've got value there, right? If he starts to chip in.
Yeah, just a couple more questions, if I may, before we finish, Neil. Solanke, what's the early thoughts down there? He's not really hit it off.
He needs a goal for us, but he's getting there. He missed an absolute sitter against Saints, which won't have helped his confidence. He sort of fell over the ball 3 yards out with an open net in front of the away fans at 3-3. So that was not so good. But I think he does give us something slightly different. In that he is a little bit taller, he's perhaps a little bit stronger than Wilson and King.
He's not short of ability. It's noticeable as well in that we were talking about on Tuesday's podcast about under 21 players, and it's noticeable that he's got the number 9 shirt for England rather than Calvert-Lewin or Abraham. I mean, that's a vote of confidence.
Yeah. My one concern with him is that the fact that both Chelsea and Liverpool have now passed on him, albeit with a fee for Liverpool. But that doesn't necessarily mean Eddie Howe can't bring something out of him.
He's still young. He still is young.
Yeah.
Sometimes strikers take a bit of time to fill out and blossom, but maybe that's what he needs, a step to a club like Bournemouth for a couple of seasons to mature and get some first-team football. Because neither at Chelsea or Liverpool, he didn't ever break into the team. But when you got the likes of Firmino and whoever Chelsea had, Drogba and all that ahead of him, it's hard to break into the team and get minutes, you know.
When England under 20s won the World Cup, he was top goal scorer and best player, wasn't he? I think.
Yeah.
There's no doubting that the lad's got potential. I think he'll end up being a very good target player. The problem is breaking through into your team. I think you're right, Neil. With all the guys contribute in the tallies, even like King and that. So if you're going to get in the team, you've got to be putting the ball in the onion bag.
Yeah. And our third striker slot is really there for the taking this year. It has been occupied by Lys Mousset, who I don't think has really showed enough this year.
No, I agree.
And Wilson can get an injury. King occasionally picks them up, so that there is definite space for a third-place striker to get 15, 20 starts a season still. And I think that is Solanke's to lose.
He obviously was 4.5 last year. I expect that he'll probably be 5 this year. Because he's not just going to be sitting on the bench at Liverpool. He was originally classified. But I think towards the end of the season, he could be one to really, really... I think he could end up being a lot of teams come sort of second half of next season. I think if he was to break in through that team. And I think he might actually. One non-FPL, Neil, because you kind of mentioned it with... I mean, I never knew that about the stadium and the fact you only own one side of it. It's incredible. For anyone who's ever been before, essentially the stadium's in a park. I just want to know, because I find it really fucking difficult to get an away ticket at Bournemouth. Are you going to do anything, mate?
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I can barely get a home ticket.
I know.
So,
Yeah.
But I hope so. There's been a lot of movement behind the scenes on like Companies House and things with rearranging of ownership for the positive, I think, as well, just to add that in there. But I think it's going to be a few years off. They have shown us what they think it'll look like. There's a lot of chatter about the fact that what needs to happen for it to move. So we want to, if I don't know if you remember the ground, but supposedly there is an athletics track behind that that they want to switch places with.
Oh, okay, it's a similar site, basically.
So it'll probably be about 20,000 is the sort of projected.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be bigger for you at the moment.
No.
No, I see us getting something similar maybe to the Liberty Stadium or something like that.
Can they not do anything with the current stadium? Or is it because they don't own it? Or
We would be able to do it, so we could fill in the corners, has been suggested, but you're sort of developing in like a rental house, basically. It'd be like adding a conservatory on a rental house. That you then perhaps want to buy.
I could see Bournemouth ground sharing with Southampton. Could you see that?
oh Jesus!
I hope not.
It wouldn't happen. Wouldn't happen,
Enough of
mate.
our fans go that way. But,
Nah.
Just because you ground share with the Olympic Committee doesn't mean others have to do that.
We're squatting at the Olympic Committee. We're basically in their house without having to pay rent. That's what I'm saying.
I believe that's how you got the stadium, is paying rent to someone else, mate.
Yeah, but the rent's cheaper than a hot dog at the new White Hart Lane, as it goes.
Daniel Levy, I told you, he's not stupid, mate. The beer's cheap, the food's reasonably priced, mate. He wants people in the ground early spending money, mate.
Do you have pick and mix, by the way?
Yes.
Oh, hate it.
I have seen that shit.
I hate it. But there we go. Neil, listen, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. Tell the listeners where they can find you on the old Twitter and anywhere else.
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is at AFCBNG. I'm on there tweeting about obviously fantasy football, fantasy cricket at the moment, and just general sport, really.
Nice. Who are you tipping for the World Cup?
Oh, it's got to be England.
Yeah, closely followed by India. I think have got the next best shot, but yeah, bring it home. And can I ask a question? Is that you in your Twitter bio with the morph suit and the fez hat?
Yeah, that is me. that is me in there. I was there is a story behind that, which I'm sure I'll share at another time.
If you follow Neil on Twitter, you can have a look at his bio. The most interesting about that picture, Neil, is there's a blonde girl looking over at you, and she's just the most kind of what the hell am I looking at look on her face. I think that's the most interesting thing. But definitely find Neil at AFCBNG on Twitter to have a look at that.
If Bournemouth made condoms.
yeah.
Neil will be their marketing guy. Fantastic. Well, look, thanks again for all your work educating the listeners and followers about Bournemouth and contributing to the website over the year. And we're looking forward to kind of more this season as well.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for having me on and letting me bore you about Bournemouth.
No, it's not boring at all.
Mate,
it's one of the clubs that I don't think anyone hates Bournemouth or Southampton, maybe. But I don't think anyone's got a bad word saying they have delivered for most FPL teams this season as well. So
yes,
there we go. James, anything to add?
No, just that I think like come the start of the season, we'll be looking at the Brookses and the Wilsons and the Frasers
it wouldn't surprise me if 90% of teams have a cherry.
The attacking players. I know it's been different. You had plenty of people last season say, "Oh, I had Wilson at the wrong times and stuff," and I've always spoke over the years about them being quite streaky. But Wilson and Fraser last year, over the course of a whole season, were very consistent.
For sure. Listen, thanks for listening to the Planet FPL 30 in 30. We're 13 days now. There's still 17 more shows to put out, James. We've got a lot of recording to do.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, ciao for now.
Cue music, man, child.
The Fantasy Football